Game of Thrones meets Arabian Nights in a blood soaked epic fantasy inspired by the Ottoman Empire and the Crusades, featuring Lovecraftian eldritch horrors and jinns and magic and fighting and war crimes. And yeah, this was a ride. I am, of course, talking about Gunmetal Gods by Zamil Akhtar. So, hello, welcome to the channel. My name is Zach. This channel is mostly science fiction and fantasy reviews, and apparently everything that I find on Reddit and add to my TBR list. And that is exactly how I found Zamil Akhtar's Gunmetal Gods and how I devoured it and loved the first book in the series. So, yes, reading a post on our fantasy on Reddit, someone was praising Gunmetal Gods and it just sounded so intriguing. I had not heard of it. It doesn't have a ton of reviews on my normal sources of finding books, like, yes, of course, it's Goodreads and seeing what are related books or other booktubers and Reddit. So it's not one of the most popular recommendations on Reddit. It's out there. Once I did some research and Googled on Reddit, it's mentioned a few times, but of course, nowhere near the heavy hitters like your Brandon Sanderson, your Robert Jackson Bennett series like The First Law, Joe Abercrombie. Actor is a more self-published author, so he's a little bit under the radar. So if you're looking for something different, like I was, and the thought of a Lovecraftian horror fantasy intrigues you, something set in the Middle East for once, I highly suggest checking out Gunmetal Gods. So I have a lot of notes for this one because it's one of those books that, yeah, it took me a bit by surprise, just how interesting I found it. But as a debut novel, it did have its pros and cons. To start things off, the main story revolves around two older protagonists. So it's told in this setting where you bounce back and forth between Keva and Micah. And these two older protagonists gives it, if it wasn't set in Middle East being different enough, yeah, it gives it a different vibe and flavor to the characters as opposed to use a tired trope like a Randall Thor from Wheel of Time, where you have a teenage protagonist off to save the world. Our setup here as we start the novel is these two older heroes of past wars are getting brought back, or at least Keva is getting brought back into the fold for one last fight, one last hurrah to take on a djinn, for not a djinn, but like a magic user that he's famed for killing in the past. The king has him do that one more time. You did it once before, you do it again. So he's a celebrated war hero of this great achievement for taking down kind of a mage in this world. And with that notoriety, of course, he's kind of let himself go. He's older. He has a child, and he just, from the story, he just wants to smoke his hookah and enjoy kind of the retired life after fighting wars in the empire. But that's the context. And as the novel starts out, we bounce between, like, one chapter will be Keva, one chapter will be Micah, and we kind of go back and forth between these characters in a very grimdark setting. So this is, I think, as I read later, Zamil Akhtar is kind of a horror writer masquerading as fantasy, and I would kind of see that as true in the sense that everything here is very dark. It's very descriptive. It's kind of a bleak outlook on the world that the characters inhabit and they live in. But that's not to say that the world itself was one of the most intriguing parts of the story to me. And that is kind of, yeah, what I liked. So as I moved into what I liked, what I most enjoyed from this book was the world building. So while on the one hand, I would say it's grimdark and bleak in the sense that there's a lot of bloody violence that goes on, the world building and the prose of how Akhtar describes everything was just so rich. I was totally immersed in this story. Maybe just the context of myself. I, for over a decade, photographed Indian and Pakistani weddings. So Middle Eastern culture is very near and dear to me. I really kind of immersed myself living there. Maybe also, on the wall, a huge fan of Dune. So I love that culture. For my master's NYU, we went to NYU Abu Dhabi, which was great. Went to Dubai. I visited India for a job a couple years ago. So I really enjoyed the culture. Not to say like I'm a, you know, uh, lover. I don't know if there's an equivalent term for like a weeb for Middle Eastern culture, but I definitely enjoy Middle Eastern culture. I think it's really cool, really interesting, really rich. And that is on full display here in Gunmetal Gods. That the world building and how actor just describes the rooms that Keva is in, how he's eating things, drinking things, talking about poetry all the time. It just felt like I was living in that world with Keva and Micah, and it's just so great. That's one of the strongest things I would say. And one of the things I like about fantasy books in general is when I'm really engrossed in the world. And this, of course, hits in many different worlds. I like the world of the Expanse. I feel like I'm living in the Expanse, and that's in space. But here in Gunmetal Gods, I felt like I was living in the old Ottoman Empire with magic in the background and fighting with Keva. So it was really cool. Really, really enjoyed. Probably the strongest point is the Middle Eastern inspired world that the author just really immerses us in. And everything just felt dusty and gritty, and I could smell the spices and the description. But that said, the other aspect, the second point of what I really enjoyed was yeah, what I mentioned, that underlying magic, and that's where it really felt like Malazan for me, which is another series that I am currently obsessed with because it also hits all those notes of things I really enjoy, of a rich world building where there's kind of a mystery behind the scenes of the Warrens and the Gods, and that is 100% Gunmetal Gods as well. So if you like a series where there is kind of another world of magic and that's in the background, and that's what we see in Gunmetal Gods. There's like this magic realm that and only read the first book, but that we kind of get a glimpse of, and we get more of a glimpse towards the end of this the first book. But early in the book, we get hints that the world is magical, but is not really on display. And towards the end, yes, the author does reveal a bit more of the mystery of kind of what's going on as our character, of course, uncovers this. So we learn things through Keva and Micah. So as we experience the different way the gods are kind of, as we find out, kind of meddling in the world, that's as we learn, that's how we learn as readers through their eyes what is really going on and the underlying kind of mystery. And it's, I guess, sort of spoiler, but not really, because that's the premise of the story that really drew me in. The blurb on the back that it does somehow involve Lovecraftian gods, and we see those here and there. Once in a while in the first book, we see kind of glimpses through our characters' eyes where they see these gods and angels. So that's a really, really cool thing. If you like these elder gods or gods playing a part in meddling in the lives of humans, which was a key theme so far. I'm only on book 3 of Malazan. I think you'll really enjoy Gunmetal Gods. And this two things, the world building and the kind of god building magic system is yeah, top notch. The characters themselves were also, as I mentioned, one of my favorite parts because being that older, wiser, been through battles, have loved and lost. They just bring a different perspective. And as an older reader, I appreciate that. And I think I resonated and connected with Keva and Micah for good or bad. Of course, they kind of fluctuate on their morality, I guess you could say, throughout the book because both of them display some, questionable motives at times, whether that's being influenced by the gods or through their own just kind of yeah, ambitions, I guess you could say. Yeah, it's nice having kind of an older character where they're a bit morally gray. So that's also kind of playing in that grimdark themes. The magic and the gods was definitely a slow reveal. How it we get glimpses of it, and by the end, it recontextualizes a bit some of the things we saw early because now we know, oh, that's kind of, I guess, what was going on behind the scenes, what we get glimpses of, and as we see these events later. So it was that kind of great slow burn. But the counterpoint, and the last piece I liked a lot was the pacing. I thought was fast, was good. Like there was always action, action, action. You go from event to event, and it just kept going. It was one of those books I couldn't put down. I finished it in just a couple days. So whatever librarian, add this to their queue. So I added it on my Libby queue, put the notice, notify me when my local library gets it. They got it. I checked it out and read it in a couple days. I hope, librarian, if you're reading this, that wasn't because I didn't like it. No, it's because I liked it so much that I finished it in like 4 days. So I just could not put the book down. I thought the prose and the pacing was top notch, being so fast. That was one of the things I didn't like about books like wheel of time where it kind of meanders a bit and develops characters. That's nothing wrong with developing characters, but by being that fast pace where there's always some driving action, some event. And as we were shifting from Keva to Micah and Keva to Micah, and they're both on these paths and careening towards each other. Yeah, this is the pace has kept me hooked. And that's, I guess, where I'll transition into maybe the slight negative parts is the Keva Micah dynamic. So at first, I admit, even though, as I mentioned, I'm pretty well versed in Middle Eastern culture, I was confused a bit in about the first third where we're still kind of figuring out what POV we're following because, as I mentioned, it starts from Keva, who is kind of in the Ottoman inspired world, and then it'll switch to Micah, who is kind of in the Crusades Christianity side of the world. And these two sides are at war with each other. But since they're kind of both at war, just slightly different, it is sometimes a bit confusing to tell who is doing what when they weren't like explicitly fighting with crusaders and the like telltale signs of each side, but when it was just kind of interstitial events that didn't have like a specific faction or like not creature, but like, yeah, just faction or people in it that specifically let me know that, okay, these are like the Ottoman inspired side. This is the Christian Crusader inspired side. It was a bit hard, but I like any novel, as you get more familiar with the world, I think as the writer kind of finds his legs and the characters find their legs, we kind of understand what is going on and how it takes a while, but they eventually, you kind of understand the setup. They're going to somehow come to a head. These two storylines are going to intersect. And it's not clear at the beginning. Like there's no defined rivalry at the beginning that Mike is doing his thing. Keva is just wants to just smoke his hookah and chill over here in his thing. And just because it's a book, you know that eventually they're going to have to intersect and something's going to have to drive both sides to come together and these two characters specifically to come together to form like the main rivalry. Otherwise, yeah, why are we following these characters? So that was, I guess, maybe the only thing that didn't work as well. Maybe the other thing that wasn't as well, or not just as well, but like a content warning, I guess you could say, is some of the scenes were pretty graphic. But I will say a lot of the most things that stick out in my mind as I think back on the book, having read it about a couple weeks ago now, is it all happened off screen. So whether that's a good thing or bad thing, I think it makes it almost even more impactful because you're left to your imagination to understand what just happened when this event happens. Like when I'll put it out there, when Micah is recovering from a certain battle, a certain thing happens to Micah, and it happens off screen, but the characters talk about it before it and after it, and you kind of understand what was happening, but you're left to your own imagination to put the pieces together. So that's a good thing and a bad thing. I think it's good horror writing, right? It's kind of a tell, don't show. So, or is that the right way to phrase it? It's yeah, just letting you as the reader to make the connections and fill in the gaps for better or worse. If your imagination is goes there, it goes there. So that was what I did liked, and then maybe just didn't like or didn't like as much. But overall, my overall impression of this was it is amazing. I really, really enjoyed it. I thought the world building, the pacing, the kind of deep seated mystery with these Lovecraftian gods has like this astral magic system of jinns that are just really cool. And we learn that towards the end. So it does kind of have a payoff at the end as our older characters do sort of transform at the end as we they reach their final form, and as kind of the larger world opens up towards the end, we kind of see where this is going, and I am hooked. I'm all in. I'm doing this review because the second book in this series just came available at the local library, so thank you, New York library system. They just got Conqueror's Blood book 2, so I am super excited to continue the Gunmetal Gods saga. Definitely worthy of continuing. I think it's a really interesting read. If you're looking for that grimdark, kind of in the vein of apparently Game of Thrones, which I haven't read, but maybe reading stuff like this makes me mean I should read Game of Thrones in 2026. But if you like Game of Thrones, if you like the First Law and kind of that gritty world building of the First Law, or most recently Abercrombie's The Devils, I think kind of that the world of the Devils remind me a lot of the world of Gunmetal Gods, how it's kind of like rough around the edges and dirty and real. But also, if you like Malzahn, which yes, I'm currently loving Malzahn. So that is also what I felt a lot with the kind of gods meddling in the lives of humans, that kind of underlying power struggle of the gods happening in the backgrounds. But we do get glimpses of the gods in the real world. And I thought that interplay and that world building was just so well done, so cool. And I love the older protagonist, having Keva and Micah being older and wiser on their kind of get the band back together, one last hurrah, and they've gotten themselves wrapped up in this epic battle of the gods. And yeah, I am here for it. I'm ready to read more of Gunmetal Gods. And as a debut novel from a new indie author, yeah, I think it's worthy of giving it a shot and getting it some more recognition because, like I said, I enjoyed it so much. It's probably like a 4 out of 5 for me, just because a little rough maybe on the prose and the writing style as a debut, but enjoyment factor was a 5 out of 5 for me. So overall, it's easy kind of 4.5 out of 5 stars for me. Really good book, really worth my time. And as I mentioned, just a really quick read, just grabbed me and would not let go. It was definitely the type of book that I am looking for in a fantasy novel. So thanks for listening to this review of Gunmetal Gods by Zamil Akhtar. Hope you enjoyed it as well. And let me know if you read it in the comments, or if there's another book in this genre like that has that feeling, that vibe, that apparently I am looking for and really enjoying. I'd love to also check it out for other series. So thanks for watching and have a great day. Have a great week.